It is an execution! Get them!
With the recent success of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, Illumination Studios is back in the discussion about animation, especially as far as villains are concerned. These guys may not be playing absolute fire on the piano, but that doesn't mean their villainy doesn't shine. Unfortunately, that also means their prison time will. I'm Kristijan with WickedBinge, and today we're gonna head to the courtroom to sentence Illumination villains for their crimes. Part 2. For this video, we'll be sentencing the antagonists of the first Minions movie, The Secret Life of Pets, and Sing. Relax, guys, we'll get to Bowser one of these days. Today we're going to start with the movie that continued the obsession, for better or worse, with the Minions, that being Minions. We'll kick things off with the movie's main antagonist, the proudly evil Scarlet Overkill. With an evil streak that puts Gru to shame, or honor, depending on how you look at it, Scarlet Overkill is an absolute menace, and she doesn't even try to hide it. On the contrary, she works to be the most evil villain in history, to gain the respect, or more accurately, fear of everyone around her.
I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I hate you.
She makes a celebrity out of herself and her evil deeds, appearing as a special speaker at VillainCon. The movie's main plot has her taking the Minions under her wing as partners in her scheme to steal the Queen's crown, which is bad enough already. It gets worse when you consider her willingness to send the Minions to be tortured and killed by Herb for betraying her, by which she means them simply getting the crown and immediately giving it to her like she wanted. Even being proven utterly wrong about their betrayal, she still attempts to kill her underlings for a misunderstanding on her end. It's obvious that Scarlet is totally unstable, lacks any sense of a moral compass, and we haven't even mentioned her years of terror and mass destruction before meeting the Minions. We also didn't mention the fact that while attempting to kill the Minions for revenge, she caused mass destruction across England and presumably killed many people. Really, there's no doubt about it. We've got to sentence her to life in prison without parole. And we will use the freeze ray again if necessary, which will probably be right when she's melted out of that gigantic block of ice. And on that note, since they're in the same place for a while, we can't ignore talking about Herb Overkill. He's Scarlet's husband, the Hal to her Lois. That is to say, he's an extremely loving and loyal husband who would do anything for his wife. Unfortunately, while this is in and of itself a good thing, it's brought down by the fact that said wife is Scarlet, a pure evil villain who's absolutely proud of the fact that she's pure evil. Herb is responsible for making most of Scarlet's equipment, including but not limited to weapons and even outright torture devices.
Prepare for torture, which I do.
While Herb does seem to be quite pleasant outside of Scarlet's influence, he's willing to follow any order she gives him, even torturing and attempting to kill the Minions, who he was actually quite friendly with beforehand. This goes to show that while Herb is not necessarily evil on his own, he's also not against committing any number of heinous crimes if it pleases Scarlet. Considering that he's frozen in the same block of ice as Scarlet, we also don't have much choice but to just sentence him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That said, we'd have to actually give him that anyway. He might be friendlier than Scarlet by a long shot, but that doesn't make him any less loyal to her, and while he's far more likely to be susceptible to rehabilitation than his beloved wife, his devotion to her would almost certainly result in him trying to break her back out. Still, we'll let them have each other, at least. This next entry might seem a little unfitting since they aren't antagonists, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Minions. These little guys might be adorable and every 40-year-old mom on Facebook's favorite meme icons, but don't let that cute, mildly annoying nature fool you. The Minions are psychologically built to serve the most evil master they can find. They're incredibly devoted to them no matter how dastardly they are. In Minions, for instance, they try to apologize to Scarlet even after being wrongfully locked up in her dungeon and almost tortured by Herb. You'd think this would mean life in prison without a doubt, but let's think about it. If we lock the Minions up only to release them one day, then they'd just go back to serving evil people again. If we kept them in prison for life, they'd help dangerous criminals escape and go back to their lives of crime, now with hundreds of new hands at their disposal. And if we executed them, well, that's just really mean, honestly. Forgive me if that's too soft-hearted, but we've got to find a different solution, right? Well, here's my idea. The Minions are really stupid, right? They still serve Gru even when he stops being particularly evil. So what if we had decent people pretend to be evil, then keep them as, like, pets? It's simple and a rather unorthodox way of pet whispering, but it might just work. We sentence the Minions to behavioral therapy and domestication. Keep them in bananas and apples and things will probably be just fine. With Minions wrapped up, let's talk about the secret life of pets. Don't let this next entry's cuteness fool you. Snowball may be adorable, but he's not a bunny you want to mess with. Let's just say magic tricks aren't the only kind this little guy has up his sleeves. or fur, whatever. As a leader of the flushed pets, he's a criminal who proudly accepts his place as a human-killing menace bent on revenge over the many pets who have been abandoned by them over the years. He's particularly proud of Ricky, the only member he knew who would kill humans on sight. He died, though. Rip Ricky!
That was ready to kill humans on sight!
He's guilty of assault, attempted murder, conspiracy, and even attempted world domination. That said, it's not right to count out Snowball's redemption. After being adopted by a little girl, he has a change of heart and decides to be a pet again. This time, to a loving owner who won't abandon him. In the second film, Snowball's even one of the main protagonists and genuinely tries to help those around him. Now, it's still worth noting that Snowball is a mentally unstable individual who once acted as a genuine danger to humans. Had he been caught, it's possible he would have been taken to that big magic hat in the sky, but it's also worth noting that he's a cute little bunny, and while that didn't stop him from causing his fair share of trouble, to say the least, he certainly has a sympathetic story and a happy ending that allowed him redemption. It's safe to say that as long as Snowball is safe and happy, so are the humans surrounding him. Furthermore, we're going to sentence Snowball to life as a pet, which he seems happy with anyway. Come on, you didn't expect us to be hard on him, right? He's so darn cute. Firstly, we get to the movie Sing. Next up is the tiniest villain on our list, Mike, the mouse from Sing. He's a sharp contrast next to the other protagonists of Sing. He's arrogant, entitled, and rude. At the beginning of the movie, he threatens a monkey who didn't give him enough money while he was performing on the street, forcing him to empty his wallet.
Empty your pockets right now!
He also swindles 3 bears out of $100,000 to buy a car, so determined that he'll win the competition that he's willing to cash out before he's even got the money. Considering the bears' loan shark-esque tactics, which we'll get to later, it's doubtful that they'd go to the police about it, but we can at the very least add assault and robbery to his list of crimes. He's also partially to blame for the destruction of Buster's theater, and arguably for endangering Buster's life by telling the bears that he had the money they wanted. But again, it's unlikely we could add these things to his list of crimes, considering Buster himself told Mike all was forgiven, which is really generous, just as a side note. Still, Mike could use a bit of rehabilitation to humble him a bit and maybe discourage his patterns of con artistry and assault. We'll sentence him to 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 6 months. He's far from the moral lows of Seth MacFarlane's more well-known roles, but we can't let him get totally off the hook scot-free. Oh, but we'll at least let him take his saxophone. Not going to deprive the prisoners of that beautiful talent. Now, usually I'd be sympathetic for the victims of a scam, but I think we can all agree to make an exception for the gambling bears. Goldilocks got really lucky that these weren't the 3 bears she ran into. They have no issue threatening people to get what they want, using their brute strength to intimidate others into constantly knowing who's in charge. Worse still, these guys don't mess around. They have incredible intuition, able to tell immediately that Mike has cheated them out of money. While this would usually make them the sympathetic party, the fact that they attempt to literally eat Mike when told he doesn't have the money makes this more of a gray area. Imagine, if you will, if this movie were made up of human characters. A large man just threatened to cannibalize a much smaller con artist. We're sure this isn't their only count of assault, or at the very least, threats and extortion. We're giving these 3 a hefty sentence of 20 years in prison. They likely won't have any problems there, though. For our grand finale, we come to the most memorable villain of the film, and the only one who really had a proper redemption arc, Big Daddy, aka the father of Johnny, one of the movie's main characters. Big Daddy is the notorious leader of a criminal gang of gorillas. His first crime is the fact that he's not a kangaroo, since his clear Australian accent would have made much more sense coming out of a big buff kangaroo, and would have been way funnier.
We're security now, mate.
But jokes aside, this man has been the target of police for what is presumably a very long time. At the very least, enough to have loyal associates and a reputation as a feared mob boss-esque criminal. He's had many successful heists before, and his biggest heist at the climax of his character arc is one that he says will have him and his gang set for life. This would not only constitute grand theft and evasion of arrest, but he also adds prison breaking to his record at the end of the movie. Granted, it was solely to apologize to Johnny and hug him, telling him how proud he is of his boy, so it's about the sweetest motivation you could have for a prison break. That being said, it still is in fact a prison break. In Sing 2, he seems to have learned his lesson, having been released from prison for community service and even acting as a bodyguard alongside the rest of his gang to protect Johnny and the others' performances. This shows that he's improved as a person a lot, but it still feels like a bit of a light sentence given the gravity of his crimes. We'll sentence him to 20 years in prison, and the possibility of parole won't come along until 10 at least.